Hello and welcome to the Hole in My Heart podcast. This is episode 257 from 2016 to 2026.
I just gave you a buttload of numbers. To say.
A lot of numbers.
Hello and welcome to the Hole in My Heart podcast, where hopefully I won't say buttload more times than I just did twice. 2016 to 2026. What are we talking about? I'll tell you in just a minute. But we're coming at you from the WCSG radio studio in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And on this podcast, we talk about how the gospel is good news for everyone every day. My name is Lori Krieg, and I have alongside me my husband and favorite licensed therapist, Matt Krieg. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing good, I think. We'll have to come back to that in a later date when I've had time to actually think.
Matt, I hear you. This season, we were talking about how we can become healthy disciples who make healthy disciples. And as we do often on this podcast, we talk about human sexuality. And today we're talking about the human sexuality field and the trend early January. I know it's late February. Just deal. We were talking, there was like this trend going on social media. I don't even think you know about this, but it was people were posting things from 2016, which... Oh,
I have heard through sports that was considered the last non-complicated year or something like that. That's why that's what I heard. Because they talked about a fight from a hockey game in 2016 when I was watching a hockey game last night, and it was tied to that. So I'm assuming that's That's like the last time any of us were happy. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. But maybe for some of us, that's true. Anyway, 2016 actually was a bad year for us, but it was trending because it was just like 2026. Let's look at last year. So we are going to invite a new friend of the podcast, Kristen Miele, to talk with us about the last 10 years in the human sexuality field. Matt, tell us a little bit more about her. Yes, Kristen Miele holds both a bachelor's and master's degree in community health and has been a certified health education specialist since 2016.
Hey.
She has taught sex education to children of all ages in diverse settings for over 15 years, and Kristen is the creator of Sex Ed Reclaimed, a digital curriculum with more than 35 hours of content, now used in all 50 states and 14 different countries.
With that, let's officially welcome Kristen to the podcast. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I have watched you from afar for a bit, so it's not to sound creepy, but it's great to, meet in person, so to speak.
We love it. We love it. Every time people are like, oh, we watch your podcast or, we've read your stuff. I feel like I know you. I'm like, if you read or watch our stuff, we know each other. We are in this world together. So we're super thankful. And you really are in this world with the work that you do. So let's start with the question that we ask every guest, because it's super interesting to hear both people's gospel journey, and it always factors into the rest of the questions that we ask them. But if part of the gospel is I am more sinful and flawed in myself than I ever dared believe, yet at the very same time, I'm more loved and accepted in Jesus Christ than I ever dared hope. When was that gospel first good news for you, and how is it still?
Love a good Tim Keller shout out. I think that was true for me as a kid, as much as a child can understand that. I grew up, probably like many of your listeners, in a Christian home who loved Jesus. And I didn't really have the chance to experience that more fully, like how flawed I was, but I was more loved than I dared believe and understood until college. I actually went to school in Western Michigan. I won't shout out which school because I did not like it and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I did not have a good experience there. It was a big struggle my freshman year. It's a Christian school.
Aww.
And so I transferred to a Big Ten university. And I loved it, but it became much more apparent that I had this choice of how to live out my faith, how to live out my walk. And as much partying as there was going on in kind of stereotypical college activities, which hadn't been going on at the Christian school I was a part of for a year, I also knew that there was a lot of things missing in these folks' lives, that they would wake up the next morning and have regrets or have shame or struggle with what they were doing with their time and their energy. And there was a lot of desire, I think, in that for Jesus that I didn't quite see in the somewhat lukewarm, if I may, Christian university setting I was in. And so there was this great opportunity. And I actually think to this day, I still live that out a bit of, I understand people's chances, or not maybe chances, but I understand people's options out there and what they are drawn to and what they're excited about and what they're curious about. And this informs my sex ed, like I said. But there's also that aspect of this isn't giving me what I really am hopeful for. This isn't actually speaking to my identity like I thought it would. And there's this gap and there's this like hole I'm searching for the answer to, and I want to fill it. And so that's ultimately where I experienced that more fully for the first time, was in that university setting. And really, I got to lead a Bible study in my sorority. I met my husband through a ministry that reached out to Greek students. And I really experienced this like duality of, I'm in this very physical world and my flesh has these desires, but I also am seeking my purpose and what I was made for, and speaking to people in the reality of both of those things, and how Jesus so overabundantly meets the need that we all have.
I love that. How do you still see the gospel good news for you today?
I see the gospel as the only answer, as the only thing that can still fill what the world is searching for. I see him as a person. I see him as the Spirit speaking to me. I see the gospel as the good news. I mean, it's corny because we grow up learning that, but it's the only good news there is, especially in a world inundated with constant bad news and difficult news. Like, where is our hope?
Right.
There's so many reasons to feel hopeless. And it is the only thing I have that truly gives me eternal hope, both in teaching sex, in my marriage, in my family, and the place we're living in now. It is the only good news we can really cling to.
I mean, your story lends pretty directly to the work that you've been doing for the past 15 years, teaching sex ed. How have you seen kind of the culture around it, the messaging around it? How have you seen it change from when you started to kind of where it's at now?
So I started teaching sex ed in 2012, and I was teaching to the Big Ten university students. I was teaching in secular environments for much of my sex ed experience. And I think both in the secular world and in the Christian world, I saw this propensity to believe and trust that parents still had time to talk to their kids, that there was going to come a moment, or for Christians, it's often like a weekend, a purity weekend, where they could have all of these important conversations. And, maybe it would be awkward, but they would get it done and they would check off that box. And I think that has drastically changed even in the last 10 years, to where more and more parents, again, whether they're in the Christian world or not, are realizing, oh, shoot, I should have already started this, and my kids have already been exposed to this, and they're already aware of what's out in the world. So I no longer get to form their ideas about sex and bodies, but rather they're already being formed. And now it moves from, oh, we'll talk about that one day, or when she goes through puberty, to, oh, shoot, like I needed to be doing this the entire time. And I am seeing that shift, which is a good shift, because you need to start when kids are little, because that's the foundation. So that's, I think, something that's changed drastically, even since I started, like you said, 15 years ago.
So we've been publicly in this space for like 10, 11 years. So that's like what's in my head is like, what is different from 10 years ago? And then the whole trend of like 2016 until 2026 that has been going on. It's just made me more reflective, especially around the sexuality conversation. So I guess, where do you see fear? Because I think as parents in 2026, we could get swallowed by fear. You'd watch one reel, you're toast. You watch two reels and you're like, okay, so everyone's offline and we're all living in a bubble. So how do you see fear changing from 10 years? If you want to go back to when you began in 2012, that's fine too. But in the last 10 years especially, how have you seen fear change?
I think fear has only been magnified. I was just reflecting on this yesterday with a friend, and it's starting to feel, and this is my opinion, but it's starting to feel like there's almost groupings of people a bit. And that one is very motivated for the good and the bad by fear, like fear of the world, protecting our kids from that, fighting against what is out there, making sure our kids aren't impacted by that, fear of what, big groups are doing. And then the other group, I feel like, is often more motivated by, well, there's a lot of bad out there, but there's a lot of opportunity for the gospel and for evangelization and for me to be in relationship. And that's kind of how I feel like we're living in this like dual space of, well, which is the right group? Like both of them have motivating factors to them. Love and fear are both motivating. But one, to me, and even as I talked, you could probably see which one I'm more inclined to, feels more like how the person of Jesus lived his life. And one feels more scared, right? Fear. They feel more motivated by what they're afraid of and what they would like to prevent rather than what God can do in their life. And so I see fears becoming more and more prevalent in parenting. And that's, as you talk about in your book too, Lord, like that's not what ultimately we want to parent out of. We do want to parent out of love. We do see that we're all sinners in need of grace. We are all sexually broken. And so in this space, I really prefer to disciple and to parent and to teach out of a place of joy, of love, of opportunity, rather than out of this mentality of, I'm really afraid of what's out there. And I don't want my kids to see it or be aware of it at all. And I think that's something we have to discern within our spirits and pray about too. And I think that's a hard place to stay in.
Yeah, I mean, that fear space tends to make people more reactive in their approach to what they're dealing with. Because, I mean, let's face it, we can't protect our kids from everything. Our kids and we are impacted by a lot of stuff that we never would have chosen, if we were given that opportunity. And so I guess how have you seen parenting maybe hopefully shift into a more proactive space? And then what are some of those gaps that like we still, especially maybe in the Christian parenting world, where there's still some gaps in ground that we need to make up?
Yeah, I love that you asked that, Matt, because you're right. I think the fear aspect relates to reactive parenting, whereas kind of an opportunistic, grace-filled approach relates more towards proactive. And that is how I want parents to view this opportunity that they have with their kids. I see that a bit in what parents are asking their kids. 10 years ago, I think very few parents were asking their kids, hey, what have you seen? You've been to some sleepovers. I want to know, have you seen anything that's made you curious or intrigued or scared? What are your friends talking about? Like, what are you seeing at school or in the co-op? I don't think parents were asking that. They certainly weren't when I was little, and they weren't when I started this work. And now I think parents are aware, my kids have probably seen something. My kids do have access to devices. I want to be more proactive about having that conversation with them as they're growing, rather than just simply reacting to, well, what's happened? What crisis is going on? So that's something I think has changed too in the last 10 years, which is really good.
Sorry, it was just really interesting. You said, parents, we have an opportunity. And like, I almost had a visceral response in me, I don't think of parenting and sexuality as an opportunity. Typically, it's like I have to grit my teeth and like move into it and everything. And so I don't know, is there a way for you to help a parent who maybe has that more fearful response, more of that like, okay, let's get it done response, or how do we see this as a genuine opportunity that we get to be a part of something exciting for our kids?
So I would ask the question, are you excited to disciple your kids? And most Christians walking with the Lord would say, well, yeah, it's going to be good. It's what God called me to. I want to disciple them. I want to be, one of the voices in their head. I want them to trust me. So why wouldn't you sexually disciple them and be excited about that too? And usually the visceral reaction is due to our own past, the traumas we experienced, the legalistic teaching approaches, the impact of purity culture. We have this almost visceral reaction to, I have to do sex ed with my kid. Like, I have to talk about sex because of our own past experiences and not because of what could be. And so that is part of my mission, is to change this conversation from, shoot, this is like a hurdle I have to jump, a challenge I have to overcome, something I have to do, to this is something I get to do. This is a way I impact my children, not just now, but their future relationships, their dating, their future marriages they might have, their future sex lives. Like, I want my daughters to have a healthy sex life. And maybe that's a weird thing to say, but it's true. And so that changes my framework a bit to, this is an opportunity I get to have. When my kid comes to me and says, which she has, I put this on my Instagram channel, Mommy, where did I come from? When she was 3, and I get to walk through that conversation with her. Like, it is fun for me. But that's because I'm excited to talk to her about God's design, God's care for her, God's creating of image bearers, right? Which is the beginning of our identity. These are fun conversations to have. They're interesting. It doesn't mean they're not uncomfortable. They certainly can be. But usually the reaction of, I don't want to do this, is related to our past and not experiencing sexual health conversations in a positive way or a healthy way or a holy way, and not related to them, right?
I relate. I'm still stuck on fear.
Okay.
I just always think, I look at myself in the mirror. I'm like, oh my word, you're like the literal worst person to be talking about this. Like, all your issues, your trauma. I was the kid who got signed out of sex ed when we went to public school. I was told by my parents, like, hey, read this book. My older siblings were like, don't read the sex book. And I was like, not going to read the sex book. So I just my education, terrible. Okay, but back to the fear, because you were talking about hey, we can do this out of fear. I don't want my kids to be hurt, because that's part of it. So here's Lori's fear. You just heard it. I'm inadequate. And the only reason I can see it as an opportunity now is because I've studied my brains out. And I've tried to simplify it for myself so that I can simplify it for my kids. That's one reason. But then I get so scared. Here's where I want to talk about. I get so scared, like you were talking about, people who are I want to protect. I also want to protect. Honestly, and that is part of my role as a mom. But then on the other side, if that's tends to be the more conservative side, which I can be that, then the more liberal side, I see their fear can be, I don't want to be like my parents, because I do not want my kids to have a legalistic worldview. And then I'm like, well, I got that fear too. I get scared of legalism. I don't want to be legalistic. But then it's the reactivity. So the reactivity of the liberal side, sorry, I just have to use language, is I was just listening to a podcast that was parents, you're not bad. It's only dysregulation. Everything is dysregulation. There's no sin. So that's it's just learn how to regulate emotions and everything's great. And I'm like, well, I know that's not true. But then on the other side, it's just avoid sin. And I'm like, well, I know that's not true. So I guess I'm just curious, how do you what's your internal work? How do you get to a place where you're okay, Jesus, just help me to be brave enough to say a sentence and see it as an opportunity?
Well, you are inadequate.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm a guest on your show, but you are.
Yep.
So is Matt.
That's right.
So am I. And so are my parents, and so are your parents, and so are your siblings. So there's a certain recognition and a peace I feel saying that, because there's only one who is the most adequate. I think a change in my own life happened. I was an overseas missionary, and I had a renewed, like I said, I grew up in the church, but I had a renewed sense when I was living in this other country doing missions of the Holy Spirit and how powerful he is and how unique in the Trinity he is while still being God, that mysterious Godhead. And so I noticed a lot more on the mission field that I was aware of his voice and that he would say things to me that were so not me. And I became inclined to follow him in that capacity. And I've noticed coming off the field that is still very true in the way that I'm able to talk to kids about sex, that the Holy Spirit speaks to me. And if you are a follower of Jesus, you have him. You have total access to the same power that rose Jesus from the grave. Therefore, God is not afraid of this topic. God is not inadequate. God does not operate out of fear. And we have the access to that same power. And that is what motivates me. It's not because I'm not inadequate and that I don't have fear or that I don't desire to protect my kids. That's normal. You're a parent. Like every parent desires to protect their little precious, beautiful children. I want that. But I also very much, I think my experiences have taught me that reality is there. Like I can't protect them from everything. We all know that too. And seeing what kids even just asked me in classrooms was mind blowing. Like I was shocked at and this was before the iPhone came out, before smartphones came out and what kids had access to yet. I was shocked by how much kids were seeing in the world. And that there's something about that really motivates me to get out there and talk and disciple and engage and love and see them kind of where they're at in a different view because I saw it. And that's not something I think most Christian parents see is, because they're pulled from class, right? They didn't go through sex ed, but I saw it. And man, even a decade ago, kids were asking things that just humbled me, I'll say, to put it nicely. But really did shock me and hurt my spirit. So that doesn't cause me to have fear. But that causes a lot of motivation to engage and to be excited about engaging because I can impact that child. I can change how they're viewing the world since the Lord is working through me and can speak to them. So that's where I'm at. I don't think it's like a perfect wrapped bow conclusion, right? Like you never really fully get over that aspect of fear, but it's something.
Okay, so your curriculum is used across all 50 states and multiple countries. And you're kind of interacting and you're hearing these questions that these kids are asking, some of them shocking, some of them, heart-wrenching. Did you notice, was there a difference, I guess, between the questions that a non-Christian kid would be asking versus what the Christian kids were asking?
Fair question. And my short answer would be no. I really wished sometimes that I had a camera in there, a video camera, to show parents what their kids are asking, because I have taught in youth groups, Christian schools, of course, non-Christian schools, all sorts of settings. I taught abroad when I was a missionary, and that was in what people would often call a third world country. And so I certainly thought going into that place, these kids will ask far different questions than what the kids in the States ask. Kids in rich Chicagoland ask or whatever. Nope, they don't. Porn is the great equalizer, right? And so all of this is at an equal playing field for what they've seen, been exposed to, wondered about, are curious about. They have peers maybe who are seeing things that they haven't, but then those peers are sharing with them, neighbors, cousins, etc. And so no, I would say ultimately, if anything, I noticed that faith-based kids and even kids who come from other conservative faith backgrounds were a little bit more afraid to have the class. They were a little bit more shy in their question. Maybe they came up to me after because they didn't want to ask it in front of the group, but their questions were still just as sad. They were just as heart-wrenching, as the word you used, as the non-Christians, because they were still in the world, right? They're still seeing things. So yeah, it was good for me to see as a prequel to creating curriculum one day, because I can still hear their questions in my head. I mean, some of them were just that way for me.
Okay, wait, here's the camera. So what are the questions parents are asking? They're asking right now. What are my kids wondering?
Okay, well, one time I remember a child, I was teaching a class on puberty, and we were asked to talk about grooming tactics. And this kid, and I don't know if he came from a faith-based family or not, asked me, is it normal the first time you have sex? So he was 10 or 11. Is it normal the first time you have sex with 3 girls at the same time?
Oh,
this
buddy.
was probably 9 years ago. And you just assume, right? He's seen porn. Somebody's shown him porn. Maybe he's been in an abusive situation. And his follow-up question was, well, then why would you only have sex with one person at a time? And then right after that, I had a boy come up to me, and he actually talked to me about his faith. His faith background was Hindu, but his uncle was touching him at their house. And so he shared with me, is it normal that my uncle does exams on me? And I said, is your uncle a physician? Is he a doctor? No. He just lives with us sometimes. Well, he had been telling this little boy that he was going to do exams. And this class where I'm talking to 10 and 11-year-olds, and I am incorporating some kind of anti-grooming, language, he's recognizing, oh, wait, I think what my uncle is doing is not okay. But it's like this, again, if I'm going to frame it in a way that's hopeful, it's this opportunity for this kid to get out of that situation, to tell somebody, to have ramifications for this uncle, to give protection. And I'm sure you guys have heard stories, but there are many kids who say, if somebody had just told me that what so-and-so was doing was inappropriate and wrong, I would have gotten out of it sooner. I would have had language. But it starts when they're 3, 4, 5, and their parents are giving them slang terms for parts of their body because, they're too scared, basically, to say, this is your vagina, this is your penis, this is your vulva. And so those are just 2 questions from the same day of teaching puberty education over a decade ago that I still remember, because they weren't asked just to raise laughter in the classroom. They seemed like very genuine questions and issues. And so heartbreaking.
So what can parents do to become more of the safe people who kids then ask the parents? What can parents do to make it not show up in the classroom and talk to you, but that these conversations are happening younger?
Absolutely. What they can do is they can start today. Like if somebody is listening to this right now and they recognize, I have not really been having conversations with my kid. I have been waiting for the right time, quote unquote, or I have been a bit scared, or I haven't really gone to the Lord and given him my own sexual brokenness, my own sexual sin, and that's maybe preventing me from having conversations with my kids, then start now. Start with your 3-year-old by naming appropriate parts of the body appropriately and saying, like, this is how God made you. This is God's good design. Start with your 14-year-old who you haven't talked to in a long time about anything except when they start to go through puberty, and say, hey, I just want to acknowledge the elephant in the room. I want to acknowledge that I haven't been having this conversation with you, and that I need to be, because I care about you and I care about what God says, and I care about your safety. And so we're going to start, even if it feels a bit uncomfortable or awkward. I understand that. But one way parents can do that is by telling their kids what they wish they would have had. Like you said, Lori, I was given a book. My siblings told me not to read it. Very similarly, I was given a book, I remember, on HIV. I was 16, and it was a really outdated book. So it said HIV was contagious potentially through kissing, which is not true. And my brother had the book at the same time. He was 6 years older than me, and he was like, nope, don't do it. And I hid it under my bed because I was ashamed. Okay. This is where it starts. And in reality, we need to start like now, today, with our kids. Use opportunities around you. Talk about the guy you saw at the coffee shop who wasn't dressing how typical men dress, and why that might be going on with him, and what he's searching for, or where he's looking for identity. And you don't know because you didn't talk to him, right? But kind of have that conversation with your kid. What did you think? What do your friends say about that? I think part of the reason I see this as an opportunity too is because you get to grow in relationship with your child, right? You get to see their worldview and what their little brain is processing, or their teenage brain is processing. And you get to really just have deeper relationship with them. Like there's so much intimacy there when they are coming to you because they trust you, because you've had these conversations before. And there's a lot of beauty in the safety of that.
So I can think of a few different, I guess, approaches that parents might tend to take that are well intended. I don't even know if it would be appropriate to name them. I guess some people will avoid, and we kind of talked about that. Some people will be very open with their own, experience from when they were a kid, and then share, I don't know if the horror stories or all the places that it could take them. And I guess when you think of the different methods that parents have taken that are hopefully well-intended, like what has not worked? And then like what do you feel like would be a healthy just parental approach?
Yeah. I do like that you say well-intended, because I never want to sit here and just blame the previous generations, blame our parents, blame purity culture. There's not a lot of progress in blaming the past. And like you said, they were well-intentioned. That doesn't mean that they did the best job, but they were well-intentioned. And so we can recognize that and really move away from that. Things that don't work, one-time talks, purity weekends, fear-based messaging. I mean, we've talked about fear. I think about, my background is in public health. And I think about how when I was in high school, and maybe you can relate to this, they brought a car in that had been in a drunk driving accident, and it was a really messed up car. We're like, oh, this car is so jacked up. Like, look what could happen to your life. Don't drink and drive. You're dismissed. And like, why doesn't that work? It doesn't work because it doesn't get at people's hearts. It doesn't get at their desires to drink and why they drink. It doesn't get at addiction. It doesn't get at, ultimately, it really doesn't get at the depravity of man by just showing a picture, right? We have fleshly desires. I mentioned that at the beginning that draw us to things, and we have to confront those. And showing a really bad car doesn't do it. And so that's fear-based messaging. With sex ed, a lot of people think of like showing gross pictures of STDs and saying, you don't want to get these, or like, look at this mom, right? Look at this mom who had a kid as a teenager. Her life's really hard. You don't want to be her. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Do the right thing. Those do not work. They seem like they would work, but fear-based messaging doesn't change the heart, and it doesn't change future outcome. Another thing I think about that doesn't really work, but's well-intended, is outsourcing the conversation. So I love to help parents do this. I've created language specifically because parents reach a point where they say, I want to have these conversations, but I don't know how. Great. I have all this language you can watch with your kids and learn from. However, if you are only in a place of, well, the youth group will talk about it. Our pastor's so good. He will touch on it. This book, I will hand this book to my kid and they will be forever changed. She's a really motivational speaker. She'll do a great job at impacting my teens. I'll send her to that weekend away. That doesn't work because that's not spiritual formation. That's not sexual discipleship. It is a one-time event that ultimately will not impact their life for as long as you will, right? Parents have this insane amount of time with their kids. Like they get them forever. Like for their whole life, ideally. And this means that you have a long time to disciple your kids. We all know that parenting doesn't stop when they're out of the home. Like I haven't experienced that yet, but that's what I hear. And so therefore, we have this lifelong conversation we get to have with our children. We cannot put it into a weekend or into a motivational speaker or into a book. So, and we can't use fear-based messaging because when sex is framed mainly as like this, don't do it, it's dangerous, avoid it, once you get married it'll be great, but don't do it, then we start to like shut down and hide from it. And that's not formation, that's behavior management. Mm-hmm. And that's not what Jesus ultimately wants from us.
When it like shuts our brains down, like we get into defend mode. If you read some of that brain science, like if you get only told fear, then you look at the world so afraid. But when we're actually told the beautiful vision, our brains can calm down. We're more creative. We're more engaging. And so it's like such a beautiful, what you're saying, like the ethical, the moral, the brain science, the theology of it, just all points to, yes, let's talk about some of the dangers, but let's lead with the beauty. Let's keep preaching toward the beauty. Here's the reality, and then here's how Jesus can redeem. If there's one piece of advice you'd give a parent, if you could go back and give parents advice from 10 years ago, what would you tell them?
I think as it relates to this conversation, I would say don't wait until you're ready or wait until you think you need to have the conversation. Start now. Maybe start when your child is curious, but ideally you start now by utilizing opportunities around you to ask your kids, what do you think about that? What have you heard about that? What are you learning about that? You really don't need perfect answers to all these questions. I think sometimes parents want to know, or I'll get emails, and I'm sure you guys do too. How do you answer this? How do you answer this? How do you answer this? How do you speak to this? That's not ultimately what parents need. They really just need to be present with their kids to show them, I am a safe place. I do want to talk about this with you. I'm not afraid of this topic. God isn't. He created it. He cares about sex. It's a way that we can see more of who he is, see his glory, be close in intimacy with our spouse. He has a context for it for this reason. And so there's not like a perfect talk to have. It's really about building that relationship where your child keeps coming back to you because you're the one who talks about it. Because otherwise, they will just go to Google and they will just go to their friends. And those don't give them, they'll go to porn, right? And that doesn't give them the information or the hope or the joy or the design that we want them to understand.
When you think about the next 10 years, what is it that does give you hope that we can impact this conversation in a positive way?
I think what gives me hope is that parents are finally, I say finally, but finally choosing engagement over avoidance. So one of the things I do is teach mom groups, and I've done that, many times over the years, but 10 years ago, even when I would ask parents, how many of you learned about sex from your parents and feel like they did a really great job? In years and years of doing that, I had 2 people raise their hands. 2. Especially if I added your parents and your church did a really great job. Like then it was like nobody. And now I'm already seeing, I even taught a class last week of MOPS, or it's called MomCo now. And 2 moms in that class raised their hand. And they were younger. They were in their young 20s. They had like 3 and 4-year-olds. And they were like, oh, this is why my Christian parents did great. And this is what they told me. And this is what my church talked about. And I was just so happy because I think it's beginning. It's started. Parents are engaging. They do want to talk to their kids. They want to be present in this part of the world. So they're starting earlier and they're staying open for that conversation longer. And they're committing to ongoing sexual discipleship, essentially, with their kid. And not just the rules, and legality kind of outlook, but rather formation. And that's really amazing.
That is so encouraging. That encourages me.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much, Kristen. Where can people find you and your resources?
My resources are at sexedreclaimed.com. I have free samples there. I have ebooks there. And then I have my full video curriculum for kids ages 3 to 18. So there's 4 options for curriculum based on how old your kids are, because of course you want to stay age appropriate. And then after that, they can find me on Instagram at sexedreclaimed, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
Yay! That's the best. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Laura and Matt. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really encouraged by other people working in this space and showing more of Jesus's love and how much he cares about this.
Well, we said an official goodbye to Kristen, and we will link all that she said on the show notes. Matt, what stood out to you?
I think the big thing was just that final, that hope piece. Just that parents are starting to pay attention. And I think if there's one takeaway, it's just, hey, you don't have to have the perfect answer. You don't have to have the perfect informational, download to your kids. It's just, do you have attunement and connection and a willingness to step into this messy but potentially very glorious opportunity?
You're so cute. Oh, you're like, this is not an opportunity. I feel like you're everyone. Matt is everyone because I'm like so immersed in here and I've had to do my own journey, but I'm like, oh, Matt, still haven't talked to Ellis yet, have ya? Still haven't had the conversations.
It's coming.
Follow, like, and subscribe to hear that future, hopefully non-traumatic, but experience for Matt. You could do it. I also appreciated that moment. And I will say, though, I am going to keep being such a person who is going to offer specific language and encourage us to be adaptable. Just as someone who totally pushed do not download, don't learn, don't understand for like so much of my life, I appreciate both the relationship and the language. So parents, you're doing so great. Caregivers of the next generation, youth pastors, focus on the relationship. What do we keep saying here? Pray, study, and wing it. Amen. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you to Kristen Miele for joining us today. A big thank you to WCSG for hosting, to Bethany Sanderson for doing the video, Steve Odell, the audio, and for all of us here at the Hold My Heart podcast. We're going to see you next time.